Spoof movies are either massive hits or massive letdowns. But George of the Jungle doesn't really fit in any of these categories, and I'll tell you why. George of the Jungle clearly acts as a spoof of Tarzan and the stories of Tarzan. I don't believe the actual Disney movie was out at this point, but the stories were, and I think their interpretation of a spoof version worked. I can't say it was massively successful, which I'll get into later on, but in my opinion, the silly sort of humour, the family-orientated vibe, it sort of works, and the high-energy performance of Brendan Fraser, again, which we'll get onto more later on. But you could see what they were trying to do with Ursula being Jane, with George being Tarzan, and him imitating the vine-to-vine swinging, but crashing into trees, making it funny, making it silly, making it stupid. The problem I have with George of the Jungle, this was the very first time watching it. I have no nostalgia towards it, and I think nostalgia helps out a lot when reviewing this film, because if you had prior nostalgia, I think you could connect with some of the scenes which you at the time found hilarious, funny, or really great. But this was the first time me watching it in 2026, and I can clearly say that the humour didn't land as well as I thought it would, and I just think it came across more silly, more stupid. If you're probably like a 10-year-old watching this at the time, or a young kid, I'll tell you now, you probably had the time of your life watching this sort of film, but if I'm being honest, most of the spoof movies I watch feel like they don't have a ceiling. I love films like Superhero Movie, which is obviously a spoof of the superhero films. You've obviously got Epic Movie. I'm not a fan of that one. I'd probably put this in the same sort of bracket. You've obviously got the scary movie films. I like 1, 2, and 3, which are brilliant. But then obviously you've got Kick-Ass and things like that, and Johnny English, Austin Powers, these kind of spoof movies that don't feel like they've got ceilings. They feel like they can swear, they can take the mick out in it and go way over the top. And that's what you've got to do in spoof movies. I loved how Brendan Fraser turned up in this film, and it was high-end, looking like he'd just gone on a night out with Ozzy Osbourne with the amount of drugs that he looked like he'd taken in this film. He was absolutely exploding on screen, and I think this sort of performance probably got him a lot of acting roles after this, because, to be honest, I think he was the guy that was dragging this film out the mud at times, keeping it interesting, keeping me somewhat involved. Would you prefer to watch this over Tarzan? Because that's something you've got to ask yourself. Because sometimes, like with Scary Movie for instance, I'd rather watch that than I Know What You Did Last Summer and Scream, which is clearly mocking. There's certain times where I'd rather watch Johnny English than James Bond, because quite frankly I don't really like watching James Bond films, but I know I could get that with watching Austin Powers and Johnny English. There's a time and a place where I feel that spoof movies can be effective in being almost better than the original that it's trying to imitate, and sometimes become like Shaun of the Dead's kind of a spoof as well of zombie films. I think that those kind of films, there's a time and a place to watch them, and sometimes they can be better than those. I don't think you get that with George of the Jungle, unfortunately. But like I said, I don't want to be too harsh on this film, because I've got to understand that I didn't grow up watching this film. I don't have that prior nostalgia that some of you folks at home would have had. And I get the fact that this film ain't going to be for everybody, and it certainly weren't for me. I'd rather watch Tarzan 1, which I think is a classic. But let us know your thoughts down in the comments down below. Do you enjoy this film? Is it something that you treasure as nostalgia? Or is it something that you actually truly enjoy and you just can't understand why I don't get it? But I would probably rate this film a 5.7 and a poor film, because in all fairness, I would 100% watch Tarzan over this. I don't think the spoof connected with me personally. And I just think there's several better spoof movies out there that I'd rather watch. If you haven't yet seen our Baby's Day Out movie review, then I think you folks need to go check that out right now.